Hi, in this video I'm going to teach you how to factor trinomials. A lot of students are having problems in how to factor trinomials. The main reason for that is they don't understand how the expression was obtained. When I say how the expression can be obtained, we have to understand factoring as the reverse of multiplying expressions. Let's take for example x squared plus 5x plus 6. So basically, when you are faced with a trinomial, the first thing that you need to do is to check whether there is a common factor on the three terms. As we can see, the first term is x squared, the second is 5x, and the third one is 6. So although the first and the second has x or have x, the third term is just a constant or a number, so we cannot factor out the x. So in this case, a trinomial can be factored into two linear factors. The problem is, how do we get those linear factors? Before I continue factoring the expression, let me explain first, or let me show you how to multiply two linear factors. Let's say if I have x plus 3 times x plus 2, I know there's a process in which you have to follow certain rules in multiplying expression, but I'll focus on a technique that is very common. Some people call it FOIL because it stands for multiplying the first, F for the first, multiplying the outer terms, multiplying the inner terms, and multiplying the last terms. So when I say first terms, so x and x are the first, outside is x and the 2, so they're the outer part of the expression. So inner are 3 and x, and the last term for each factor is 3 and 2. So when we multiply the first and the first, and that will give us x squared. When you multiply the outer, that is the x, and the 2, we get 2x. And then when we multiply the inner, the 3 and x, we get 3x. And then we multiply the last, the 3 and the 2, it will give us the 6. And combining like terms, you get x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now what I want you to understand is how this number was obtained. So basically, when you factor expressions, so the 2 and the 3 always give us the third term. So it should be, so the numbers that we need for the first and the second factor should be factors of 6. And since I have already shown that it's a 3 and a 2, and then later on you will have to analyze which pair will be better, but for now, so for 6 it should be a 3 and a 2, so the numbers will be a 3 and a 2. Also, x squared was obtained from the first and the first, that is x and the x, so this must be x and this must be x. Now the 2x and the 3x was obtained from the outer and the inner. So that's how we check whether we will get the middle term 5x. So this is 3x and this is 2x. If you add them, it will give you 5x. So that means the factor should be x plus 3 and x plus 2. Okay? So let me show you another example to understand the idea. Okay, so let's say I want to factor x squared plus 4x plus 4. So first check is to check whether they have a common factor. X squared, 4x, a constant. There's no x on the last term, so we cannot factor any common factor. So what we can do is to break this down into two linear factors. Always remember that the first term for each factor will depend on x squared, and that should be x and x. Meanwhile, the last terms for each factor will depend on the 4. Now, we can have 4 and 1 to get 4, or we can have 2 and 2. Now, suppose we chose 4 and 1. Always take note that the outer and the inner should sum up to 4x. Otherwise, the numbers are not correct. Now, to check that, we need to find what is 4 times x, so 4x, and 1 times x, which is 1x. This will either give you a 5x if you add them, or a 3x if you subtract them. Definitely, these two are not equal to 4x. So x4 and x1 will not be a good pair. So what we can do is to find other pairs. So x and x will remain, but we have another option, 2 and 2. So x and x will still give us the x squared. 2 and 2 will give us the 4. Our problem is, will we get the 4x? So this is 2x and this is 2x. And if you sum them, it's 4x, or if you subtract them, it's 0x. But since we have 4x, that means the combination should be correct. Now, to determine the signs, if you need a positive 4, it's either you have negative and negative to make a positive 4. But if we'll make them negative and negative, then 2x will become negative 2x, and the other 2x will become negative 2x, which will result to a negative 4x. So we don't use negative 2 and negative 2. And the other option should be a positive 2 and a positive 2. This makes the outer and the inner as positive 2x. Okay, so the correct factored form of x squared plus 4x plus 4 is x plus 2 times x plus 2. Okay, to sum it up, again, the idea would be, so for x squared plus 4x plus 4, so first check is, do we have a common factor? If there are no common factors, then we have to proceed. So if there are no common factors, we have to proceed with our next option. You have to break it down into two linear factors. That is always the case for trinomials. And then, so to fill the linear factors, the first terms for each factor will depend on x squared, the first term. The last term for each factor will depend on the last term of trinomial. So you have to use all the possible combinations that when you multiply them, it will give you a 4. For example, 4 and 1 and 2 and 2. Now to check if the numbers are correct, to determine whether the numbers are correct, this will be your guide. The middle term will be your guide. The sum of the outer and the inner should be equal to the middle term of the trinomial. If you can get that, then that means the factor should be correct. Now this one will also guide you whether you have a negative negative, negative positive, or positive negative, or both of them are positive. Okay, so I hope you understand how to factor trinomials. In the other videos, I'll be showing other examples of trinomials wherein the sign sometimes is a negative in the second or negative in the third term. Okay, but for now, that's the basic way of factoring trinomials.